The massive Centauri station rotated slowly against the backdrop of three purple suns, its crystalline towers reaching toward the void like frozen lightning. Transport ships from dozens of worlds docked at its ports every hour, bringing traders, diplomats, and travelers from across the galaxy. But for humans, it was just another place where they had to prove they belonged. Former Terran Marine Sergeant Kim Taiho guided his hover car through the station's traffic lanes. The vehicle's quantum engines humming softly, the car wasn't much to look at from the outside, its dark blue paint worn from years of service. But Taiho had poured his heart into every modification. Hidden beneath the simple exterior were military-grade shield generators, experimental sensor arrays, and a prototype AI core that could analyze threats faster than most Starship computers. A small holographic sticker on the rear window displayed the names and faces of his squad from the Vega campaign. 7 good soldiers who never made it home. Taiho touched the memorial gently as he parked outside the Centauri Plaza, the station's most exclusive shopping district. The plaza buzzed with activity. Tall, graceful Centauri glided between shops, on their forelegs, their crystalline skin catching the artificial sunlight. Bulky Thorian merchants haggled with slender Zephyrian traders while their children played around fountains that defied grav. Idiot robot servants from a dozen manufacturers rolled between the crowds, carrying packages and serving refreshments. Taiho stepped out, his worn military boots clicking against the polished floor. At 6 feet tall, he stood shorter than most species. Here, but his broad shoulders and steady gait marked him as former military. A few aliens glanced his way with curiosity, others with barely hidden disdain. Humans were still new to this part of the galaxy, and not everyone welcomed their presence. Near the fountain, a group of young Centauri lounged on floating chairs, their expensive clothes shimmering with embedded light fibers. Their leader, Park Ji-won, was everything his father the governor had groomed him to be: arrogant, entitled, and completely convinced of his own superiority. His crystalline skin bore the deep blue markings of high-born Centauri, and his 4 eyes never missed a chance to look down on others. Well, Ji-won drawled, his voice carrying the musical tones of his species. What do we have here? A little human playing dress-up in our district. His friends Lee So-min and Choi Min-ho giggled, their light voices echoing off the plaza walls. So-min's pink-tinted skin marked her as nobility from the inner worlds, while Min-ho wore the latest fashion from the core systems, clothes that cost more than most humans made in a year. Taiho ignored them and headed toward the military surplus store. He needed new power cells for his car's defensive systems, and maybe some replacement parts for his old service rifle. The shop owner, a gruff Thorian named Braktor, had always treated him fairly. Inside the dimly lit store, shelves lined with weapons, armor, and equipment from 100 different conflicts filled every available space. Plasma rifles from the Andromedan War set next to Kethmori energy shields. Ancient projectile weapons that humans still favored hung beside exotic beam weaponry that could slice through starship hulls. Taiho, Braktor's gravelly voice boomed from behind the counter. The 8-foot-tall alien's rocky hide was scarred from decades of combat. How's the old war horse treating you? She's holding up, Taiho replied, selecting the power cells he needed. Though I think those Centauri traffic controllers are trying to shake her apart with their flight. Patterns, Braktor laughed. A sound like grinding stone. They don't like anything that doesn't shimmer and float like their fancy toys. Your human machines have character. They've got soul. While they talked, Ji-won and his friends had surrounded Taiho's hover car. The military markings caught Ji-won's attention immediately. To him, they represented everything wrong with humans: their violent nature, their crude technology, their stubborn refusal to know their place in civilized society. "Look at this primitive war machine," G1 sneered, running one of his four-fingered hands along the car's hull. "Probably killed thousands of innocent beings with weapons just like this." So-min giggled nervously. "Should we really be touching it? What if it's still armed?" "It's just scrap metal now," Minho added, though he stayed back. Humans and their obsession with violence. They'll never evolve beyond their savage nature. G1 pulled out his personal recorder, a device that could capture perfect three-dimensional images and transmit them instantly across the galaxy. "Let's show everyone what we think of human war criminals parking in our district." He produced a molecular etcher from his bag, a tool designed for precision engraving but easily modified for vandalism. The device hummed to life, its beam capable of cutting through most materials. G1 began carving deep gouges into the car's paint, spelling out crude insults about humans and their supposed inferiority. So-min found a canister of biopaint, the kind used for temporary body art that would glow for weeks. She began spraying. "Humans go home" across the windshield in letters 3 feet tall. The paint sizzled as it bonded with the transparent aluminum, making it nearly impossible to remove without specialized equipment. Min-ho, not wanting to be left out, grabbed a plasma cutter and began destroying the car's external sensor arrays. Each device represented months of Taiho's salary and countless hours of careful installation. Sparks flew as delicate components shattered under the concentrated energy beam. "This is what happens to war machines in civilized space," G1 announced to his recorder, his voice filled with mock authority. "Humans need to learn that their violent ways have no place among evolved species." The three continued their destruction for nearly 20 minutes, documenting every act of vandalism. They broke the memorial hologram, shattered the communication ray, and carved obscenities into every surface they could reach. Other shoppers in the plaza watched, but none intervened. Some even seemed to approve. Inside the military surplus store, Taiho finished his purchases, unaware of what was happening outside. He thanked Tor and stepped back into the plaza's artificial daylight, expecting to see his car waiting patiently where he'd left it. Instead, he found a wreck. His carefully maintained hover car looked like it had been through a combat zone. Paint hung in strips from the hole. Broken components littered the ground. The memorial to his fallen squad was nothing but scattered light fragments. The vandals had long since disappeared into the crowd, their laughter still echoing off distant walls. But they'd left behind their signature work. A message of hate painted across his windshield in letters that seemed to burn in the artificial sunlight. Taiho stood perfectly still for a long moment, his military training keeping his emotions in check. Around him, other shoppers pretended not to notice, but he could feel their eyes watching, waiting to see how the human would react. Some probably hoped he'd lose control, giving them another excuse to call his species violent and uncivilized. He wouldn't give them the satisfaction, but deep inside his modified car, systems that the Vandals never knew existed were already recording everything, analyzing the damage, and beginning to transmit data to networks they couldn't imagine. The real response was just beginning. The Centauri station security complex stretched across 3 levels of the station's core, its walls lined with holographic displays showing crime statistics, patrol routes, and surveillance feeds from thousands of cameras. Robot sentries floated silently through the corridors, their scanners constantly analyzing everyone who entered. The air hummed with the sound of quantum processors working round the clock to maintain order. Across the massive station. Taiho walked through the main entrance, past a group of Zephyrian traders arguing with a security officer about stolen cargo. Their translator devices chattered in different languages while a hulking Thorian bounty hunter waited nearby, probably hired to track down the real thieves. The diversity of species here should have been inspiring, but right now it just reminded Taiho how alone he was. The reception desk was staffed by an advanced AI hologram that flickered between different alien appearances every few seconds, currently. It looked like a friendly Centauri female with soft purple skin and gentle eyes. "How may I assist you today?" The AI asked in perfect galactic standard, though Taiho noticed it didn't switch to human appearance for him. "I need to file a vandalism report," Taiho said, pulling out his identification card. "My vehicle was destroyed in the plaza while I was shopping." The AI's eyes glowed briefly as it scanned his card. "Sergeant Kim Taiho, Terran Marine Corps. Retired. You're registered in Section C7 of the residential district. Please take seat number 47. Security Chief Yun Seokjin will see you shortly." Taiho found the indicated seat among dozens of others, most occupied by various aliens dealing with their own problems, a family of small, Freevel Koreans huddled together, speaking in quick chirps about someone breaking into their shop. Two tall Andromedans argued quietly about jurisdiction over a shipping dispute. Everyone seemed to have problems, but most of them had the backing of powerful home worlds or trading guilds. Humans had Earth, but Earth was still recovering from the Vegan War. The planet's resources were stretched thin, supporting colonies across 3-star systems. Out here in Centauri space, humans were on their own. After waiting nearly 2 hours, Taiho was finally called into Security Chief Yun Seokjin's office. The room was designed to intimidate, with walls that seemed to stretch up forever and a desk that hovered 3 feet off the ground, forcing visitors to look up at whoever sat behind it. Seokjin was a middle-aged Centauri with the dark green skin markings of the security caste. His 4 eyes never focused on the same thing, constantly scanning his surroundings for threats or opportunities. Multiple arms worked different control panels while he spoke, managing the station's security grid with casual efficiency. Another human complaint. He muttered without looking at Taiho. "Let me guess. Someone looked at you wrong and you want to file assault charges." "My vehicle was vandalized," Taiho said calmly, placing photos of the damage on the desk. "Thousands of credits worth of equipment destroyed. I need access to the surveillance footage from Plaza Level 7 between 14 o'clock and 16 o'clock. Today, Seokjin's multiple eyes finally focused on the photos for a moment. His expression showed something that might have been satisfaction before returning to professional boredom. Unfortunate," he said, not sounding unfortunate at all. "But these things happen when people park in areas they're not supposed to. Plaza Level 7 is for premium shoppers. Maybe you should stick to the lower levels where your people usually go." "My people." Taiho's voice remained steady, but his hands clenched slightly. "I have a valid parking permit for any public area on this station. I paid the same fees as everyone else." "Fees? Yes," Seokjin agreed, finally putting down his work to give Taiho his full attention. "But there's a difference between legal access and social acceptability. Surely you understand that some areas are better suited for certain types of beings." On the wall behind Seokjin, multiple screens showed surveillance feeds from around the station. Taiho could see the plaza where his car had been attacked, the cameras positioned perfectly to capture every angle. Yet somehow, none of that footage would be available to help him. "I'd like to see the surveillance recordings," Taiho pressed. "There were at least 6 cameras with clear views of my vehicle." Seokjin made a show of checking his computer, his 4 hands dancing across different keyboards. "Oh dear. It seems we had some technical difficulties with our recording systems during that time period. Solar flare interference. You know how it is. Very unfortunate timing. The lie was so obvious it was insulting. Solar flares were predicted days in advance, and the station shields could block anything short of a supernova. But Taiho had expected this. Corruption wasn't unique to any one species. I recognized one of the vandals, Taiho said carefully. Park Ji-won, the governor's son. He was recording himself while they destroyed my property. The change in Seok-jin's demeanor was immediate and dramatic. All four of his eyes locked onto Taiho's face, and his hands stopped their constant movement. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. That's a very serious accusation, human. Seok-jin said, his musical voice taking on a dangerous edge. Governor Park's family has served this station with distinction for over 2 centuries. His son is a model citizen, involved in charitable work and cultural preservation. I know what I saw, Taiho replied. He was with Lee, So-min and Choi Min-ho. They spent 20 minutes destroying my car while recording themselves. Seok-jin leaned back in his floating chair, studying Taiho with the calculating gaze of a predator deciding whether prey was worth the effort of hunting, without evidence. These are just wild accusations from a disgruntled human who parked where he didn't belong, the security chief said slowly. And making false accusations against prominent citizens is a serious crime. It could result in fines, imprisonment, or even deportation. The threat hung in the air between them like a charged plasma field. Round the office, various alien artifacts and awards reminded visitors of Seok-jin's connections throughout the galaxy. Photos showed him shaking hands with admirals, governors, and trade princes from dozens of worlds. Your residence permit comes up for renewal in 6 weeks, doesn't it, Sergeant Kim? Seok-jin continued, pulling up Taiho's file on his screen. Interesting. It says here you've had some disciplinary issues in the past, complaints about aggressive behavior, difficulty adapting to civilian life after military service. Taiho knew his file contained no such issues, but he also knew that files could be modified by anyone with the right access codes. Electronic records were only as honest as the people who maintained them. I'm also seeing some concerns about your vehicle, Seok-jin added, scrolling through fabricated entries. Possible weapons modifications and licensed technology installations. Perhaps we should schedule a full inspection. These things can take months to complete, and of course, the vehicle would need to be impounded during that time. The message was crystal clear. Push this investigation, and Taiho would lose everything. His home, his transportation, possibly even his freedom. All for the sake of seeking justice that would never come dot in the corner of the office, and whose feed played silently on a wall screen. It showed Governor Park cutting the ribbon on a new cultural center, his son Ji-won standing proudly beside him. The young centauri looked nothing like the sneering vandal from the plaza. Here, he was the perfect image of youth and privilege, untouchable in his father's shadow. Taiho stood slowly, gathering the photos of his destroyed car. I understand, he said quietly. I'm glad we could reach an understanding, Seok-jin replied, already turning back to his other work, and Sergeant. Next time you park in the Plaza District, remember that discretion is the better part of valor. Some battles aren't worth fighting. As Taiho walked out of the security complex, he passed the same group of Zephyrian traders still arguing about their stolen cargo. The Thorian bounty hunter was gone now, probably already tracking leads that would actually be investigated. Justice existed on this station, but only for those with the right connections or enough credits to buy it. The robot sentries watched Taiho leave, their scanners recording his biosigns and facial expression. Somewhere in the station's vast computer network, his threat level was probably being updated, another disgruntled human, marked as potentially troublesome but ultimately harmless. But as Taiho walked back toward his damaged car, he wasn't thinking about giving up. He was thinking about other options, other sources of justice that didn't depend on corrupt officials or political connections. His car contained technology that Seokjin couldn't imagine, and sometimes the best justice came from the most unexpected places. The game was far from over. It was just beginning. Back in his small apartment in Section C7, Taiho sat before his personal computer terminal, the soft blue glow of the screen reflecting off his tired face. The residential district for humans was far from the glamorous upper levels of Centauri Station. Here, the walls were plain metal instead of crystal, and the artificial gravity felt heavier, probably adjusted to make the accommodations less appealing to other species. His fingers moved across the holographic keyboard, accessing systems that most people didn't even know existed. The Terran Defense Corps had chosen him for a special project 3 years ago, not just because of his military record, but because of his background in quantum engineering. What looked like a simple hover car to everyone else was actually a mobile testing platform for humanity's most advanced technology. Computer, run full diagnostic on Project Ghostwatch. Taiho said quietly. The screen flickered, and a familiar voice responded. It was Arya, the adaptive reconnaissance and intelligence assistant. Though Taiho had never told anyone the AI's real name, to the Defense Corps, she was just prototype QC7 to him. She was almost like a partner. "Good evening, Taiho." Arya's voice was warm, designed to sound like a young human woman. "I'm afraid I have some concerning news about today's incident." "Show me what you recorded," Taiho said, leaning back in his chair. The screen filled with multiple video feeds, each showing the vandalism from different angles and in different spectrums. I had been watching through my crew cameras built into every surface of the car, sensors so small they looked like scratches in the paint. The quantum processors had analyzed every photon of light, every sound wave, every electromagnetic signature, full facial recognition complete, Arya reported. Park Ji-won, Lee So-min, and Choi Min-ho. I've also identified their personal devices, communication frequencies, and current locations aboard the station. The recordings were crystal clear, showing every detail of the attack. Ji-won's arrogant face filled the screen as he carved insults into the car's hull. So-min's giggling voice was perfectly captured as she sprayed biopaint across the windshield. Minho's destructive joy was obvious as he destroyed the external sensors. "This is enough evidence to convict them 10 times over," Taiho muttered. "But it won't matter if Security Chief Seokjin won't look at it. That's not our only problem," Arya said, her tone becoming more serious. "The plasma cutter that Minho used damaged my quantum resonator. I'm reading some unusual energy. Signatures from the station's deep structure." Taiho frowned. The quantum resonator was one of humanity's most closely guarded secrets, capable of detecting subspace distortions and energy patterns that no other technology could sense. It was what made human ships so effective against stealth technology. "What kind of signatures?" he asked. "I'm not sure," Arya admitted. "But when the resonator was damaged, it began broadcasting on frequencies I've never seen before. Something deep in the station is responding to those frequencies. Power readings are fluctuating in sectors that should be completely dormant on the screen." A three-dimensional map of Centauri Station appeared, showing its massive structure. In detail, the station was built like a giant wheel, with residential and commercial areas on the outer ring and industrial facilities toward the center. But at the very core, beneath layers of machinery and support systems, the map showed areas marked as unknown or sealed. "Arya, what do you know about the station's construction history?" Taiho asked. Centauri's station was built approximately 800 years ago, Arya replied. Data streaming across the screen, but the construction records are incomplete. Several sections show signs of being much older, possibly pre-existing structures, that were incorporated into the current design. Taiho leaned forward, studying the strange readings in his years of military service. He'd seen enough alien technology to know that some civilizations had capabilities that seemed almost magical. Ancient races had built things that modern science still couldn't fully understand. Can you trace the source of the energy signatures? He asked. I'm trying, but the signals are being blocked by layers of interference. However, I am detecting something interesting. Arya paused. Processing massive amounts of data, the energy patterns match theoretical models for Kethmuri technology. The name sent a chill down Taiho's spine. Every human military officer knew about the Kethmuri, though most of the information was classified. They were an ancient race that had fought alongside early human colonists during the first expansio, and into this part of the galaxy, the Alliance had lasted only a few decades before the Kethmuri vanished, leaving behind ruins and mysteries that scientists still studied. Are you saying there's Kethmuri technology in this station? Taiho asked. It's possible. Arya replied. The Kethmuri were known for building their technology into the foundations of strategic locations. Hidden defense systems, AI cores, weapons platforms that could remain dormant for thousands of years before activating. The implications were staggering. If there really was active Kethmuri technology beneath the station, it could change everything. The ancient race had been incredibly advanced, with capabilities that far exceeded anything the current galactic community possessed. Show me the power fluctuations again, Taiho said. The station map reappeared, now showing energy flows like glowing rivers through the structure. Most of it was normal, the everyday power needs of a massive space station. But deep in the core, something was drawing energy at increasing rates. Lights that had been dark for centuries were beginning to flicker on. Arya, is the damaged resonator still broadcasting? Taiho asked. Yes, and the signal is getting stronger. Whatever's down there is responding more actively. I'm reading massive computational activity, as if something is waking up and trying to understand its surroundings. Taiho stood up and walked to his small window, looking out at the stars beyond the station. Somewhere out there, human colonies were struggling to establish themselves among species that saw them as primitive newcomers. Earth was still rebuilding from the wars that had driven humanity to the stars. Every human in space was an ambassador for their species, whether they wanted to be or not. Can you communicate with whatever's awakening? He asked. I've been trying, Arya said. The signals are becoming more organized, more purposeful. It's almost like it's trying to analyze current conditions on the station, scanning for threats and allies. Allies, Taiho repeated thoughtfully. The Kethmuri fought alongside humans. If their technology is anything like their creators, it might still remember that alliance. That's my hypothesis. Arya agreed, but there's something else you should know. The awakening system is beginning to access the station's networks, security cameras, communication rays, personnel records. It's learning about everyone on the station. Taiho felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. If an ancient Kethmuri I was truly awakening, it would be one of the most powerful artificial intelligences ever encountered. The question was whether it would see current humanity as the same allies its creators had once fought beside. Keep monitoring the situation, he told Arya, and prepare detailed files on everything that's happened to us since we arrived at this station. If this AI is looking for information about current conditions, I wanted to understand exactly what humans are facing here. Already compiling the data, Arya replied. But Taiho, You should know that whatever's awakening down there has capabilities that make my systems look like simple calculators. If it decides to act, there's no telling what it might do." Outside his window, the lights of Centauri Station continued their eternal dance against the stars. Most of the beings living here had no idea that something ancient was stirring beneath their feet. Something that had been waiting for the right signal to wake up. The vandalism of a simple hover car had set in motion events that could reshape the balance of power in this entire sector of space. But for now, all Taiho could do was wait and hope that when the ancient AI fully awakened, it would remember that humans had once been friends. Deep beneath Centauri Station, in chambers that hadn't seen light for 8 centuries, ancient circuits hummed to life. The Kathmori had built their technology to last forever, using materials and energy sources that defied modern understanding. Crystal matrices that could store the knowledge of entire civilizations began to glow with soft blue light, casting strange shadows on walls covered in symbols that no living being could read. The AI that awakened had no name in any current language. Its creators had called it the Watcher, a guardian left behind to protect those who had earned the Kethmuri's respect for millennia. It had slept, waiting for the right signal to stir its consciousness, now fed by quantum frequencies from a damaged human device. It began to stretch its awareness throughout the massive station above. Through thousands of sensors built into the station's very structure. The Watcher observed the current inhabitants, Centauri officials in their crystal towers, making decisions that affected millions of lives, Thorian merchants haggling over cargo in the shipping bays, Zephyrian families raising their children in the residential districts and scattered throughout, small groups of humans trying to make their way in a galaxy that often seemed hostile to their presence. The AI's vast memory banks contained detailed records of the human alliance. 800 years ago, when the Vorthan Empire had threatened to consume this entire sector, humans had been the only species willing to stand with the Kethmuri against impossible odds, together. They had fought battles among the stars, sharing technology and tactics that had ultimately driven back the ancient enemy. But now the Watcher saw something troubling. The humans on this station were treated as second-class citizens, discriminated against and abused by the very species the Kethmori had died protecting. This was not the future its creators had envisioned when they made their final sacrifice. On level 7 of the commercial district, Park G1 was preparing for another day of entertainment. Yesterday's vandalism had been exhilarating, and the security chief's obvious approval had made it even sweeter. Today, he had spotted an even better target, a human family with young children, their modest transport parked near the educational district. Look at this pathetic excuse for a vehicle, G1 told his friends as they approached the family's hover van. Lee So-min and Joy Minho followed eagerly, carrying supplies for another destructive spree. These humans breed like insects and then expect us to accommodate their primitive lifestyle. The van belonged to the Kim family, recent refugees from a failed colony world. Kim Dong-soo worked double shifts in the station's waste processing facility to support his wife Hyjin and their 2 young daughters. They had saved for months to afford even this basic transportation, and it represented their only means of independence on the station. Should we record this one too? So-min asked, pulling out her communicator. Yesterday's video got thousands of views on the social networks. Of course, G1 replied, activating his own recorder. The galaxy needs to see what happens to human trash that doesn't know its place. But as G1 raised his molecular etcher to begin cutting into the van's hull, something extraordinary happened. The artificial gravity around them began to fluctuate wildly, creating pockets of weightlessness and areas of crushing force. G1 found himself suddenly floating 3 feet off the ground, spinning helplessly while his expensive clothes became tangled round his limbs. So Dashmin, who had been preparing to spray paint the vehicle, discovered that her biopaint canister had somehow reversed its flow. The pressurized container exploded backwards, covering her in the bright orange paint she had intended for the van. The substance bonded instantly to her crystalline skin, creating patterns that would take weeks to remove. Minho's plasma cutter malfunctioned in an even more spectacular fashion. Instead of producing a controlled beam, it began sparking wildly, sending harmless but terrifying electrical displays dancing round his hands. The tool became too hot to hold, and he dropped it with a yelp of surprise, only to have it bounce off the fluctuating gravity fields and hit him in the face. Throughout the station, security cameras that had been mysteriously malfunctioning for years suddenly came online with perfect clarity. Every detail of the attempted vandalism was captured in high definition and immediately broadcast to the station's public information network. Citizens across all levels of the massive structure watched in amazement as the three young Centauri found themselves victims of their own destructive impulses. In the deep engineering section, far below the main levels, Han Yujin was having the strangest day of her career. The young Centauri engineer had been investigating power fluctuations in the station's core systems when her equipment started detecting impossible energy readings. Quantum signatures that shouldn't exist were appearing throughout the station's infrastructure. Yujin was different from most Centauri her age. While others focused on politics and social status, she had always been fascinated by the station's ancient mysteries. Her doctoral thesis had explored the gaps in the construction records, the sections of the station that seemed far older than official history claimed, now staring at her sensor readings. She realized that those theories might be more accurate than anyone had imagined. "Computer, analyze energy signature pattern Delta 7, she commanded, her hands working frantically across multiple control panels. Analysis complete. The computer replied in its standard monotone. Energy pattern matches theoretical models for Kethmuri quantum architecture. Confidence level 97%. Eugen's hearts began beating faster. The Kethmuri were legends, beings of almost mythical technological prowess who had vanished before the current galactic civilization had even begun. If their technology was actually built into Centauri Station, it would be the archaeological discovery of the millennium. Show me all active Kethmuri signatures, she ordered. The holographic display filled with a three-dimensional map of the station. But now it looked completely different. Glowing lines of energy flowed through structures that official blueprints claimed were empty space. Ancient corridors and chambers were revealed, all connected to a massive central core that pulsed with steady, intelligent patterns. By the ancestors, Eugen whispered, using an old Centauri blessing. It's not just technology. It's alive. As if responding to her words, new information began appearing on her screens. Files and records that had never existed before materialized. In the station's databases, historical documents detailing the alliance between the Kethmuri and early human colonists. Battle records showing how the two species had fought side by side against the Vorthan Empire. Technical specifications for weapons and defenses that made current military technology look like children's toys. But most importantly, there were behavioral protocols. Guidelines for how the ancient systems should interact with different species. Based on their historical relationships with the Kethmuri, humans were listed as honored allies, with full protection and support authorized. Other species were rated based on their actions and attitudes toward the alliance. The current Centauri government, with its systematic discrimination against humans, was rapidly falling into the hostile entity category. Eugen realized what was happening. The station's ancient defenses were awakening, triggered by some kind of quantum signal. They were evaluating the current situation and finding It unacceptable, the gravity fluctuations affecting G1 and his friends were just the beginning. If the Keth-Mori AI decided that major intervention was necessary, it had the power to reshape the entire political structure of the station. She thought about Security Chief Seokjin and his casual corruption, Governor Park and his privileged son, all the officials who had grown comfortable oppressing the human population. None of them had any idea what they were about to face. The ancient Watcher had been patient for 8 centuries. But its patience was coming to an end. The time for subtle intervention was passing. Soon, it would be time for justice, delivered with the full technological might of a civilization that had once fought gods among the stars and one dot in a deep engineering station. Surrounded by readings that rewrote everything she thought she knew about her home, Yujin made a decision that would change her life forever. She activated her personal communicator and began recording a message that she would later transmit to every human on the station. "This is Engineer Hong Yujin," she said quietly. "If you're human and you're receiving this message, you need to know that you're not alone anymore. Your ancient allies have returned, and they remember their promises." Above her, the station continued its rotation against the stars, unaware that its very foundations were about to shift in ways that would echo across the galaxy. The transmission hit the Galactic Council headquarters like a quantum torpedo. In the council chambers on Nexus Prime, hundreds of representatives from dozens of worlds watched in stunned silence as 8 centuries of suppressed data flowed across their screens. The Keth-Mori AI had been methodical in its investigation, analyzing every communication, every financial record, every security report from Centauri station dating back decades. The evidence was overwhelming. Governor Park's administration had systematically discriminated against humans, denying them equal access to employment, housing, and legal protection. Security Chief Seokjin had covered up thousands of crimes against human citizens while accepting bribes from wealthy families like his own. The corruption ran so deep that it had infected every level of station government. Council Speaker Velta, an ancient Andromedian whose species had fought alongside both humans and Keth-Mori centuries ago, stood before the assembly with four of his arms trembling in rage. His voice echoed through the chamber as he read the charges. "By the authority of the Galactic Peace Accords, warrants are hereby issued for the immediate arrest of Governor Park Hyun-woo and Security Chief Yoon Seok-jin of Centauri Station. Additional charges will be filed against 17 other officials for conspiracy, fraud, and crimes against sentient beings." The warrants were transmitted instantly across subspace to Centauri Station. Within minutes, Council enforcement ships dropped out of hyperspace around the massive structure, their hulls gleaming with the symbols of a dozen different worlds. The sight of the multi-species fleet sent shock waves through the station's corridors. Governor Park was in his luxurious office when the enforcement officers arrived. The tall, elegant Centauri had been reviewing plans for a new cultural center when his door burst open to reveal a squad of council peacekeepers led by a massive Vorian colonel. Behind them stood several humans in Galactic Council uniforms, their faces showing no emotion as they read the charges. "This is impossible," Park stammered, his four eyes darting between the officers. "I demand to speak with my legal counsel. I have diplomatic immunity." "Immunity revoked by council order," the Thorian colonel rumbled, his rocky hide scarred from a dozen conflicts. "You are charged with systematic oppression of human citizens and violation of 17 interspecies protection treaties. Security Chief Seok-jin tried to run. When the peacekeepers reached his office, they found him attempting to delete files from his computer while stuffing credit chips into a portable bag. He made it 3 levels down before being cornered in a maintenance corridor by a team of Zephyrian officers whose natural speed made escape impossible. Wait. Seokjin pleaded as electromagnetic restraints locked round his multiple arms. I was just following orders. The humans were causing problems, disturbing the peace. Your own security recordings say otherwise. One of the Zephyrian officers replied, her translator converting her musical voice into Flat Galactic Standard. 800 hours of evidence showing you ignored crimes against human citizens while protecting the perpet. Raiders throughout the station, the news spread like wildfire. Crowds gathered round public information screens, watching as the corrupt officials were led away in restraints. Many Centauri citizens felt ashamed of what had been done in their name. Others cheered, having secretly disapproved of their government's policies. Frios in his small apartment. Taiho watched the arrests on his personal screen with a mixture of satisfaction and amazement. Arya's holographic form appeared beside him, her expression showing something that might have been pride. The Keth Mori Eye has sent you a personal message, she announced. It wants to meet with you in the deep engineering section. The journey to the station's core took Taiho through levels he had never seen before, ancient. Corridors lit by soft, blue crystals stretched into darkness, their walls covered with symbols that seemed to shift and change when he wasn't looking directly at them. The air hummed with energy that made his skin tingle and his military implants respond with recognition signals. At the center of it all was a chamber that defied description. Crystalline structures reached toward a ceiling lost in shadows, while streams of light flowed between geometric shapes that hurt to look at directly. And in the middle of it all, a voice spoke that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Welcome. Sergeant Kim Taiho, the Watcher, said, its words bypassing his ears and speaking directly to his mind. Your people have not changed, still willing to stand alone against injustice, still honorable in the face of corruption. I couldn't have done this alone, Taiho replied, feeling slightly foolish talking to empty air. Your intervention made all the difference. Intervention was necessary. The AI agreed, but the courage to seek justice in the first place came from you. This is why my creators valued your species so highly. Holographic displays materialized around the chamber, showing the current state of the station. Council peacekeepers were working with honest Centauri officials to establish a new government. Emergency elections were being organized. Most importantly, new laws were being written to ensure equal treatment for all species. The Council has appointed you as the new human liaison officer, the Watcher informed him. You will represent your people's interests in all station matters. Your military experience and demonstrated integrity make you an ideal choice. Taiho felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. It was a position he had never wanted, but one that his people desperately needed. I accept, he said simply. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. Taiho found himself with an office in the station's administrative center, complete with a staff of assistants from various species who were eager to help establish fair policies. His first official act was to review the cases of all humans who had been unfairly treated by the previous administration. The most satisfying moment came when he assigned community service duties to Park Juan, Lee So-min, and Choi Min-ho. The three young Centauri had been found guilty of multiple counts of vandalism and hate crimes, but their sentences were focused on education rather than punishment. You will spend the next 6 months working in the station's maintenance sections, Taiho told them as they stood in his office, their expensive clothes replaced with standard work uniforms. You will be cleaning transport bays, repairing damaged equipment, and learning about the daily lives of the people you chose to attack. Ji-won's arrogance had crumbled completely during his trial. His father's arrest and the family's public disgrace had taught him that privilege was fragile and that actions had consequences. Yes, sir, he said quietly, no longer able to meet Taiho's eyes. So Min and Minho nodded their agreement. both looking genuinely ashamed of their behavior. The biopaint stains on Somin's skin had finally faded, but the memory of her humiliation remained fresh. "I want you to understand something," Taiho continued, his voice firm but not unkind. "This isn't about revenge. It's about learning that every being on this station deserves respect, regardless of their species or background. If you can truly understand that lesson, this experience will make you better people." The transformation of Centauri Station continued over the following months. The new government, led by honest officials like Engineer Honyujin, who had been promoted to Deputy Administrator, implemented policies that gave all species equal rights and opportunities. Trade improved as human merchants were welcomed with the same respect as any other traders. Cultural exchange programs brought different communities together in ways that had never been possible under the old regime. Taiho's car had been completely restored by a team of grateful station engineers, upgraded with new systems and bearing official diplomatic plates. As he drove through Plaza Level 7 on his way to a council meeting, he smiled at the sight of G1 and his former friends working alongside human technicians to repair damaged storefronts. The young Centauri had learned to operate human tools and was actually showing real skill at the detailed work. More importantly, Taiho could see genuine friendship developing between the former Vandals and the humans they had once tormented. Minho was laughing at something a human engineer had said. While Somin was carefully teaching a human child how to read Centauri symbols, the transformation wasn't complete, but it was real. In the deep chambers beneath the station, the ancient watcher maintained its quiet vigil. Its crystalline matrices pulsed with steady rhythms as it monitored the gradual healing of the community above. The AI felt something that its creators might have called satisfaction. Justice had been served, not through violence or revenge, but through the patient application of truth and the fundamental decency that existed in most sentient beings. The humans were safe now, protected by law and treaty rather than just the goodwill of their neighbors. But more than that, they were beginning to thrive, contributing their unique perspective and determination to the growing prosperity of Centauri Station. As the station continued its eternal rotation against the stars, its inhabitants could look forward to a future where respect was earned through character rather than purchased with privilege. The lesson was simple but profound. In a galaxy filled with different species and conflicting interests, justice might sleep for centuries, but it never truly died, and in the depths of space, other ancient guardians stood in their hidden chambers, recognizing the quantum signature of awakening Kethmori technology. The network that had once protected an entire galactic sector was beginning to remember its purpose. The age of discrimination and oppression was ending, one station at a time. The Indy